We can do it. Yes, we can. We can change things throughout the land. But we all must lend a hand. We can do it. Oh, yes, we can. Oh, your neighbor over there, a bit bewildered, but he cares.
Welcome to Changing Our World. My name is Linda Weltner, and today we have Janet McLaughlin with us, another example of the elderly Peace Corps members that we seem to be specializing in. Janet was 63 when she went to Ukraine in 2010. She finally got to act on something that President Kennedy had said before she followed the let's get married, let's have children, let's raise them, let's do everything responsible, and now let's think about what I want to do. And what was it President Kennedy said, Janet?
Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country.
And 50 years later, this is how powerful Kennedy was for those of you who weren't alive then. Years later, those words still echo.
Yeah.
What had you done before that, during your married life? What kinds of things had you?
Well, I was divorced a good number of years ago, and when I started working, I was in landscape architecture. I was in community development and planning. I had been a planning director in the town of Yarmouth, Maine. I had been a town councilor in the town where I lived in Cape Elizabeth, Maine. I then became a state representative for a couple of terms for Cape Elizabeth, and then I ended up working in the state government in Augusta.
Then your kids are grown, and are they married?
My daughters are married, and they both have children now.
Okay, so you saw an opportunity, and what did you do?
I put in my application for Peace Corps, and after going through medical repeatedly with the Peace Corps office, because at our age,
you have to be healthy.
You have a medical history that you have to go through.
So if you're going in the Peace Corps at an older age, take care of your health.
Yes, because they go back in your health history, and that's just fine, And finally got my assignment. At first it said Eastern Europe. Of course, I had asked for Africa or the Caribbean or the Pacific Islands. Well, Eastern Europe, I'm going, okay, that's not quite where I wanted to go.
How hard was it to learn what is the language of Ukraine? Ukrainian?
Ukrainian and Russian. Peace Corps has a very good language program. And so, about half of our group of 74 or so were being taught Ukrainian, the other half being taught Russian. Ukrainian being more prevalent in the western part of the country, Russian being prevalent in the eastern part of the country.
How hard was it?
I'm not a language person. I knew that. That's why I didn't do Peace Corps any earlier. Starting with, you have the Cyrillic alphabet. You have to learn the new alphabet, new sounds for the letters, and I got till I could say, Yerozimiu troshki Ukraini movu. I understand little Ukrainian.
Is everything longer in Ukrainian than it is in English?
A lot of things are, like the word for help, dopomagit. I'm going, help, dopomagit. Give me a break, people. If I really need help, I'm probably just going to say help.
Okay, so you arrive in a country the size of Texas.
Right.
And you're not put on the eastern border where there's all the conflict now. You go into kind of a peaceful area that's near Romania, correct?
Yes.
Tell me about the situation you found yourself in when you arrived on the job, so to speak.
After our 10 weeks of training, we all went back to Kyiv and we were given our assignments.
That's the capital.
Kyiv's the capital. I pronounce it Kyiv, which is the Ukrainian pronunciation. A lot of folks are going to say Kiev.
That's Russian.
That's Russian. That's also the chicken dish.
Oh, okay. Chicken Kiev, right?
Kyiv. And then my assignment was in the town of Hatin, the southwestern part of the country in the Chernovitska Oblast.
And you arrive at the office?
Arrived at the office on a Monday morning, and the fellow who was my counterpart was there for that morning.
This is the Ukrainian who you were to work with.
Yes. And then he left for 5 weeks of vacation. My assignment was to monitor 3 websites he had shown me for grant application opportunities so we could increase tourism in that part of
And these
Ukraine.
websites were in Ukrainian,
Of course.
in a Cyrillic language.
But you learn how to use Google Translate. It's
But
not
tedious,
perfect. Very tedious.
And he's gone. Knowing you were coming, he's gone.
It was his vacation. This is Ukraine. This is how it happens.
So then he comes back. And what do you discover?
Then he comes back, and I knew they'd had received the grant funding from a European Union grant for a minibus, so that the plan was that they would drive small groups of tourists to our local historic fortress and some of the other historic sites in the area.
That would help tourism.
That would be great. To my knowledge, that minibus never materialized.
And the money was never accounted for, as far as you know. Right.
don't
And
know.
now wait, tell me, what did he want you to get him?
Well, you know, they see an American, they see the dollar sign on the
Yeah.
forehead. He wanted a boat, so they could take tourists on the river that our town
In a
abutted.
non-existent, probably, boat.
They wanted a boat. Jeanette, it's what they called me. We will put your name on it. Then it will be sustainable. And I'm going, that's not happening on my watch. I never said that to him, but
know
kept
something?
telling him wouldn't do that.
Now, what you did, essentially, knowing that you were working for someone that you couldn't really trust to be above board and have a lot of integrity, what you did was you kind of decided to move your energy in other directions. And I'm wondering whether you think a younger person would have been as resourceful and not just stayed in that awkward position. Because I think being older, you don't worry so much about what everybody else thinks or wants.
I think a younger person probably would have had more conversations with Peace Corps staff about the situation than I did.
Good point. They could have returned to someone for advice on what to do.
Right.
Because the last thing we want to do in the Peace Corps, I would think, is send money to people who will pocket it and it really won't benefit. And then what is the Peace Corps for? Mm-hmm. Okay, so what did you find to do other than get a boat?
Did not find that boat. So even while he was away that summer, I started an English conversation club. I wasn't an English teacher, which most of the volunteers in Ukraine actually were, but practicing their conversation, since I didn't have Ukrainian and decided I really wasn't going to be
Did you
getting
put
much.
an ad in the paper, or?
I went to somebody introduced me to the head librarian, who was a powerhouse of a woman. You want to be on her good side, and I think for the most part I was. And she had, you know, posters out and told people and kind of shepherded people, strong-armed people.
And how many came into your group?
We had a couple of groups, some younger children. We probably had 20 of them, and we probably had 20 younger children and 20 older children.
Younger is how old?
Younger would have been 2nd through 4th or 5th grade, and then 6th
Do they
grade,
teach
high
English
school.
in the schools?
Yes, they do.
So they had,
They'd heard it.
yeah, they knew a
bit.
little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
And the older kids, you made friends, right?
I did make some friends with them, and it was just so heartwarming to see some of them blossom as I worked with them. I mean, there was one girl, the girl who made my vyshyvanka, actually, my dear Anne, the first couple of months.
That means shirt.
Yeah, it's a traditional shirt.
Doesn't sound like they have
sorry.
too many one-syllable words in Ukrainian.
That's right.
Okay, so
the first couple of months, she would sit there with her hair, long dark hair. She would not make eye contact. By Halloween, when I had the older children putting on a Halloween party for the internat, the orphanage children,
Yeah.
she dressed up and participated and had a smile on her face and had a good time.
And you got them to kind of not only, I mean, I think if I had been doing that, I'd just sit and talk, but you came up with ideas of projects they could undertake. That must have built a closeness between them, I would think.
I think it did. We did the party at the orphanage. We did a party for Day of Women for the mentally challenged women who lived from around the area, not just our town, who were in a facility in our town. And they put on games, they read poetry, they sang, they danced. They got out to participate more in their community, which is not typical in Ukraine.
Oh, I know. That's one of the interesting things when you go abroad. The concept of being a volunteer is foreign to a lot of countries. It's very unusual in this country that so many people are doing so much for one another and not just letting the government do it.
Yeah, well, they have what we were taught is their inner circles of friends, and they help each other out.
Yeah. Maybe that's the reason why they're helping each other out and they don't have the energy to go into.
To some extent.
Yeah.
One young boy asked us, "Why are you here? Doesn't your family like you anymore?"
Oh, yeah.
I'm going, oh my gosh. No, let me tell you what a volunteer is.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
just making those little inroads, we were planting those seeds.
Getting them to understand. So the people, did the people that you met just see a $sign on your forehead, or was that only in this leadership?
I think that was my initial
fear and feeling.
That was the initial people I was assigned to work with. And other people they were so warm. They were so generous to me. They took care of me. I had one family who I just loved dearly, stay in touch with. They would feed me, and then they would send me home with enough food for 2 weeks.
Heavy stews? What was the?
Some heavy stews, some pasta dishes.
Oh, okay.
Eggs.
Did you
cheese.
like Ukrainian food?
Most of it I did like. Some of it wasn't spicy enough for my taste
Oh,
buds.
bland, yeah.
Yeah, so it was fun to go back to Kyiv for something, or to travel to other countries in the area and get some less bland food.
So then you found someone whom you did respect, who was the head of the fortress, right? You want to tell us about that?
Yes, I was sitting with some of the English Club young women in the park, where we did English Club on nice days. A woman from the Fortress administration came and said the director wanted to talk with me. Could I come the next morning? I said, no, yeah, if one of these young women can come with me and translate, sure. And he was a delightful fellow. He had some decent English. He had studied in Canada for a couple of years, was asking for me to translate the tour that was typically presented at the Fortress in Ukrainian, asked me to translate it into English. So I worked with these gals, we got it ready. 2 or 3 of them trained with me so they could present the tour in English. And I know one of them did that, at least, for one of my American friends. So they were ready to take
And before you came, they didn't have an English tour. So so you need that kind of thing in order to attract people to understand.
Right. And the director and I worked together. I had 3 pages of ideas for increasing tourism at the Fortress.
Oh.
I ended up extending my service for a year, which I said I would never do because I was missing my grandchildren, 2 of whom were born while I was over there. And I decided to extend service so I could work with this director for a year.
And you were writing grants and doing other?
I was writing grant applications for the Fortress, and I did one grant application in conjunction with the deputy mayor in our town.
Oh, you were working with the mayor, yeah.
Yep.
And your original guy, what was his name?
His name was Andre. I remembered it today.
Andre, okay. Did he ever come and say, where is my volunteer?
He never did. I had some paperwork that I had to have him approve and sign. I remember one of those he actually changed the numbers on, and I still had to sign it, and I just thought, oh.
But I mean, one of the things about the Peace Corps is you're not supposed to alienate people if you can help it.
I just said, this is Ukraine. Now, I explained to my Peace Corps area person what had happened. I said, I just signed it, you know. I tried to change my signature a little bit.
Yeah.
But no, he never came after me. He wanted me to teach his young daughter English, to tutor her, and I had one of my gals with me to translate, and I explained I could not do that. That was against Peace Corps policy. Oh. And he literally threw a hissy fit. He was throwing things all over, and I was about to tell him how we could make it work, and the young gal with me, just her eyes kept getting bigger and bigger. I said, you can explain to him where you're going to leave now.
Oh, good for you.
Don't need this.
So, all right, so when you extend for third year, you get time to get home, right?
They give you a month at home on Peace Corps dime. Thank you for paying your taxes. And had my month at home in August 2012, went back in September, go to the Fortress office.
And you've got all these plans of how you're going to increase.
It was so exciting
and
to be able to work with
right?
him.
Yes.
And I got into the office and I go, where's Lubomir? He is no longer here. I'm going to say, what? He had been given...
You have to go with the flow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I figured, well, I probably shouldn't go home, much as I would like to right now.
Right.
He had been given 2 days' notice that he would become the director of the most significant historic site in all of Ukraine. You jump when that happens.
What did you do?
I went, duh. I said, okay, how are we going to handle this? I ended up doing more translation work with the Fortress, which is behind us here, my wonderful fortress, of the different exhibits, the information.
Oh, so that the information could be written in English.
So it could be in
Yeah.
English. I worked with my friend Andriana and another friend. We would do Skype calls in the evening because she lived in the other end of town and work through it. Google Translate was my helper too. That's where I learned a lot about the history of our fortress and different battle implements.
I like the way you
like
say
that.
our fortress.
That's my fortress.
You've,
It's
this is your adopted country, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you find was different about Ukrainian culture?
Oh, the culture. In some parts, it's still quite Soviet. And some people really like that because it was easier. You didn't have to do as much thinking. They were not taught critical thinking. They were submissive.
They learned what they were told.
They did not hold their heads up. And that's something Peace Corps makes some inroads in.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is there was this whole thing of switching our schools around and the way that public education is changing. And one of the things is you just regurgitate information and you have to train people to use their minds. Yeah. And you can teach them not to use their minds either. You can raise whole cultures where people just go along with whatever is.
We ended up saying, for those of us who remember the 1950s, who said, when we first got there anyway, it was like living in the 1950s with internet and cell phones.
Oh.
Some of that's not bad.
Yeah.
The slower pace of life, I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Much more focused on family. It was wonderful.
And they came to see you as family? Did you feel included?
Absolutely.
Because that could also mean that they wouldn't help you.
I had a number of folks who were just so warm and embracing of me. It was absolutely fantastic.
Were there many other Americans around?
For a while, there was another Peace Corps volunteer in my town. She, unfortunately, was sent home for violating a Peace Corps rule. The next nearest was 12 miles to the north. My good friend was 25 miles
But there wasn't
south,
an American community in this town?
No.
Oh,
it was a
all
town
right.
of 11,000.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was their pet America to some extent.
Yes, I know people who've gone to China and people point at them because they haven't seen Caucasians before.
Right.
Yeah, so you were really like a a wonderful colored fish
Yeah.
in the
To some
aquarium,
extent.
right? Yeah. And they treated you like family, so?
They did. They, as I said, they would feed me until I would pop. Velody, I'd be at their home, and Velody said, Jeanette, you must, they called me Jeanette, you must eat more. You must go home. Good Ukrainian woman.
Oh, and are they chubbier than our ideal?
His wife and mother-in-law were. I'm going, that's not how it's going to work, Velody. He's saying 5 minutes.
Who was the president at the time that you were there, the president of Ukraine?
Yanukovych.
And he was a Russian puppet, correct?
In my estimation, yes. I saw that happening more and more. In the beginning, I thought not so much, but I did see it happening more and more.
As you became accustomed, could you read the newspaper?
I did not even try.
Right. So it's somehow it's harder to pick up.
Yes.
But as you were there, you got the feeling more and more that it was a very controlled society.
Oh, yes.
And then what happened?
Well, my deputy mayor in my town, whom I worked with, would say, because we, as Peace Corps volunteers, we could not discuss Ukrainian politics. We could discuss American, but not Ukrainian.
Yeah.
So he would say, our country will not change until our president is killed. And I went, I couldn't hear that. I'm going, yeah, I might agree with you. I would say to him, I will come visit you in prison. I suppose
He wasn't afraid that someone would turn him in? What was there, like...
He was not. He was very progressive in his thinking.
What happened?
So I left in June 2013. I knew the government and the approach would change. I didn't think it would happen as quickly as it did, because by November 2013, they're starting their protests in Euromaidan in Kyiv, when Yanukovych declined to sign an agreement with the European Union and rather turned towards
Russia.
Mr. Putin
Yeah.
and what I would call a bribe of significant funding. And he was on the path to join the Russian Federation in its trade agreements.
Just to be fair to Russia, which you might not like, but I mean, we are taking the states on its border, and Russia feels threatened.
We cannot control how they feel.
Right, but we could also refrain from trying to get into NATO all their border countries, just like how we reacted when the Russians tried to take Cuba under Castro.
Right.
You know, it makes them nervous. But anyway, what happened was there were protests, right?
Right.
Maybe that's why the mayor felt free speaking, because he knew more about what was going on, the spirit of rebellion.
And that could be because he was friends with the Klitschko brothers, the heavyweight boxing champions, one of whom is now the mayor of Kyiv.
Oh, what did Yanukovych do?
Yanukovych. He ended up leaving the country in February. I think he was leaving the same weekend that Peace Corps was evacuating Peace Corps
because of the
volunteers.
protests, yeah.
It was just too dicey a situation. Yeah. So he ended up leaving and going to Russia, near Ukraine, but he was in Russia.
Yeah.
And then there was, with the assistance of the protesters, there was a new interim government put in place who did a fairly decent job, in my estimation. Russia saw that it was a weak situation on the Ukrainians' part. That's when Russia went in and gobbled up Crimea, and Ukraine had elections, I think it was in May, so they now have a new president, Poroshenko, who owns wonderful Roggen chocolate factories. I don't know if all the factories they're throughout Ukraine or just in Vinnytsia.
And they're still, it's now an open situation with a lot of conflict.
It's much more open. The conflict is in the eastern part of the country. Yeah. I do not personally know people there, but I know some of the impacts in Crimea, and I hear from other Peace Corps volunteers who served in the eastern part of the country what's happening there, and I follow media.
They're being swallowed by the Russian way of life.
Yeah, it's a very sad, unfortunate situation.
Okay, now I want to talk about the Peace Corps.
Okay.
Didn't you find it hard to adjust to what must have been a more strenuous way of life?
Not really. Did a lot more walking than I had done here. I was commuting 60 miles each way by car. I much prefer the walking 10 minutes down to the office in the park.
Did you have enough heat?
Always had enough heat, even though they turn it on October 15th, turn it off April 15th, regardless of what the real temperature is. But Peace Corps does give you a heater.
Oh, okay.
Which I only used 2 or 3 times.
What kind of stove?
I had a little gas stove. I hadn't had gas before, but that was pretty easy to pick up.
Yeah.
It's a similar latitude to northern Maine, so a lot of the vegetables that you're used to here, I ate chicken.
Did you find anything difficult because you were...
I had good internet service. That was initially very difficult to get, but once I got it, everything was fine. The difficult part was missing my family and friends at home, I would say, because you make new American friends with other Peace Corps volunteers.
Yeah. So far, I only know 2 older women who went into Peace Corps, including you, both of whom loved it.
There was a fellow in our group who was 80. So when you said elderly in the beginning, that's why I was kind of chuckling, going, no, I wasn't that elderly.
80?
80, yep.
Well, I'm recommending you go a little before 80, but if anyone is thinking that their family's raised and they want to do something interesting that will bring them into an entirely new field of endeavor, think of the Peace Corps.
You learn so much. It's awesome.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. This was delightful.
Obstacles slowly dissolve.
It's a very interesting story. It has a lot of little details and twists and turns and obstacles. It was fun. Fun to hear it. It's easy to dramatize, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, it's sort of like a novel.
Exactly. I mean, I did a writing every month.
Oh, yes, we can.